John Coltrane and Lester Young play pretty much the same notes. At the same time, if you're listening to jazz, you know that they're worlds apart. In this video, I'm going to take a look at 4 different solo phrases, one from Lester Young, one from Parker, one from Coltrane and one from Joe Henderson. And I'm going to talk about what makes them similar, but also what makes them different. And I think this is something that could be really useful for you to check out if you want to find some things that you can work on that are not about which notes or which scale you're playing, but really about how you construct melodies, what type of phrasing, what kind of rhythms you use, and in that way really improve your solo playing. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. These few bars are from Lester Young's solo on All of Me, and I think they're really good examples of how Lester Young improvises, and also how his style is quite different from what came later in terms of bebop and hardbop. At this point, jazz is still coming really from dance music, and that means that he's connecting a lot more to the groove. He's playing a lot more from a heavy beat to a heavy beat, just to keep things clear. And we have that already in the first part of this, so we have... So he is playing the changes. You can hear moving from 4 to 4 minor, but you can also hear that the phrase is starting on beat 3 and ending on beat 1. And the next phrase that follows this is also ending on beat 1. The melodies that Lester Young are playing are really not trying to spell out the changes in the same way that you will see with bebop. He's much more just playing short melody and melodic statements on top of the chord progression. And that's quite clear from the next part where he's playing on the 2-5-1 first. So not really playing something. This could be on a C, it could be on a D minor, it could be anything. It's not really about that. It's just about a nice melody that sits on top of the accompaniment. And the same goes for the phrase that he ends this example with, which is just repeating and playing a rhythmical idea with the root. So, and then up the triad. With bebop, the 8th note lines tend to get a lot longer, which is also clear from this example where we have Parker improvising on the bridge of Anthropology, which is a rhythm change. Here the point of the melody is also quite different, because with Lester Young, he's playing something on top of the progression. And he doesn't have to spell out, he doesn't have to log in with the chords in the same way. With this Parker line, he's clearly just really trying to spell out the changes. He's using the arpeggios of the chords that are happening. He's using chromaticism to really drive towards the important notes in the progression. And the whole melody is really moving forward. It's really pushing towards the next chord all the time. So we have him already using like a G minor 7 arpeggio, and there's also a diminished arpeggio. So in that way, he's really using arpeggios a lot more to spell out the harmony and really to sound like the chord. What then kind of goes away is that he's not nearly as much using motivic ideas in the same way that Lester Young is. So the lines become a little bit more abstract and more tied to the chord progression, but the melodies are maybe also not connected in the same way. They're just there to spell out the harmony and add some energy and some excitement and surprise the listener. The typical bebop solo will really use a lot of arpeggios, a lot of 7th chord arpeggios and chromaticism to really drive the melody forward and move towards the next chord. And that kind of disappears in this Coltrane solo where he's playing on a blues in F. This is from Take the Coltrane of the album that he did together with Ellington. And here it's as if the melodies are just sort of painted on top of the chords. He's not really using them to move from chord to chord. You can also tell that by the way that he's using some alterations on the dominant in bar 3 and 4, where we first get a leading note, so we get this line which is sort of spelling out some sort of B7 or F7 altered, but it's a little bit unclear, and it's also not really moving us towards the 4th degree, towards the B flat 7 and resolving on that B flat 7. So there's a long break and a long silence in between that and then the first notes on the B flat 7. And that way this is quite difficult. You would probably almost never see any bebop solos where this happens. Another thing that you'll find here is that he's using a lot of triad arpeggios, and he's really looking for other melodies. He's not just playing the arpeggios to really get the sound of the chord across. He's really looking for other ways to put the melodies together and create some new things with inversions and other interval structures. So we have stuff like... So there's really some search for new types of melodies and not really running the chords and just making everything clear. Joe Henderson is of course a contemporary of Coltrane, but I think maybe he's also a little bit a better example of where sort of the mainstream of hardbop was going, because I think Coltrane was really just going his own way and leaving a lot of the sort of typical traditional phrasing and melodies behind, in terms of especially the blues phrasing, as you see in the example that I just went over. Here we have Joe Henderson playing on B-flat blues off a Grant Green album. You can tell that there's a lot more tradition and maybe also going back to some swing ideas, which was also quite typical for hardbop in using a lot of blues phrasing. Another thing that this is a good example of is how Joe Henderson was looking for other resources to create new melodies. And here he's using what I would consider probably a piano voicing. So he's playing this B-flat 7 voicing as an arpeggio and then developing that idea. And probably this is coming out of the fact that he's also a very good piano player, something that I just recently learned. So this really comes across as something that has the range of a fairly large piano voicing, and that's probably what he's playing here, what he's working with. Then later we get really a clear example of him using sort of an altered dominant sound, really a melodic minor sound with... And on the E flat 7, then it's pretty straightforward what is happening, all pretty common blues, but you can also tell that the phrases are a little bit more leaning on the blues and a little bit more fragmented. They're not as long and as forward moving as the bebop phrases. The focus that I'm taking when I'm looking at these examples is not so much about exactly what notes they're playing, but I'm more talking about how the phrases are constructed and also how they relate to the chord progression and to the form. Because I think actually that's a bigger part of the style than just what notes they're playing on each of the chords. And that's also something that you can definitely explore and really develop your own soloing with, also just by using different types of approaches when you're soloing. If you want to check out some more videos where I'm analyzing saxophone players, then check out this short playlist where I have some analysis from Coltrane, Parker, Sonny Stitt, Joe Henderson and Sonny Rollins.